Hello, friends. Michael, Carl, Erie, Timothy, John, Stafford, and Suzie P. Lind. And the P is not precise because that is a Seth Erie insertion. But
Definitely
as far
doesn't
as Seth
stand for precise.
no, exactly right. That was what I was going for. And ladies and gentlemen, this is all of Tim's things. We're recording on Halloween.
Yeah.
And we're recording an episode that comes out the day before the election.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of energy sitting here on the Zoom call, and will be received on the YouTubes. Timothy.
Yes.
Did you have your Halloween party last night?
No, it's tonight.
It's tonight. Oh, that's right. You've got to clean. That's why we had to record early.
Yes.
Yes.
I have a lot to work to do.
Just tell us a little bit about what's happening. What's the Stafford Halloween
We just host
party
a big open house with like a bunch of chili pots, and then people bring stuff, and then everyone comes here like 5:00. Okay. We had like 70 something people show up last year, and they all just hang out in our yard, and then we just trick or treat to the neighborhood with all the kids. So
that's so fun.
It's very easy, very fun. I don't know. It's a fun night.
We used to do that when our kids wanted to hang out with us on Halloween.
Yeah, I'm just clinging to it right now. Actually, this year I made a welcome great pumpkin sign, from Snoopy, and put it on the front yard. And then this morning I filled buckets up with Easter basket kind of thing or whatever for the kids. Like the great pumpkin came, and Mazzy woke up and she's like, "What happened? The great pumpkin's never come before." And I was like, "We've never put a sign out before." And she's like, "I can't believe the great pumpkin came." It's pretty fun.
I mean,
that's
Tim,
cool.
Raise a child in the way they should go; they will not depart. Well done. Right.
Are you worried that when she finds out it's not real, that Jesus isn't going to be real?
Well, it's all up in the air as it is. She's 8, almost 9. She's riding the line right now. A lot of her friends have already kind of given up on certain traditions. And she's just all of a sudden kind of being like, "Oh, what about this? What about this?" And we're like, "I don't know. What do you think?" So Elliot is long past it all. She's kind of she wants this stuff to be what it is. So it's fun to play with it in that way because she's still so excited about it. It'll be sad when she tips over.
There's just an enchantment that they experience at that age that's so refreshing for us.
It is. I want it so bad for myself, so it gives me like energy when I see it in her.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then do we have a final selection of costuming?
Oh man, I'll text you guys the picture because this morning, because the kids wore their costumes to school, and then Shauna is dressed up like Hermione because the whole English team is doing Harry Potter.
Oh, that's
so she's dressed up. Mazzy ended up being a little witch from Wicked, and it's super cute. But Elliot is Napoleon Dynamite, and Shauna curled his hair, and we weren't quite sure how it would work because we couldn't get a wig in time. And his hair looks insane. And he's got glasses, the shirt, like he's been practicing his voice all morning. Walk around just going, "Gosh, did I get it down?
That's awesome.
It's so fun.
That's so good.
Yeah. And then
I'll be Malfoy tonight. I've got my full
there
Malfoy
it is
for my boring yellow hair.
For those who, perfect. For those who have been following Tim's journey over the last month about the various costume options, it's nice that we've landed here because there were other options. Now, if you're new to the podcast, Suzie P. Lind could be unfamiliar. Let me give you just a little background, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, she is the executive pastor at Journey Church, Brentwood, Tennessee.
EP.
Yep. She is also one of our teachers. She is also in seminary, going to Fuller, receiving her Master of Secret Arts, Gnostic Knowledge, and
Defense Against the Dark Arts.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where I was trying to go.
That's funny.
And yes, what's your class? What are your classes this quarter?
I am actually not taking classes this quarter because
spring break.
I had a very busy fall. So
She
I opted to not do that, but I will be taking a couple of systematic theology classes in January.
Woohoo!
That's what we're talking about. Yeah. Nothing brings Jesus to life like systematic theology.
Right.
Throw that out there.
Yeah.
Suzie, what you are one of the most hospitable people I've ever met. Do you guys do anything special for Halloween?
Well, I was actually thinking about it on the way here today because I was kind of mourning the loss of those days that looked like what Tim's having tonight.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is the first year where we have, like, our youngest is 13 and he A, doesn't know what he's dressing up as, and B, hasn't locked in his plans because he's the kind of guy that likes to keep all his options open until the last second.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure we're not involved in any of the options.
That's
fair. That's
a fair assumption.
I do get to hand out candy tonight, which I've looked forward to for a number of years, just being able to like stay home and hand out candy. But, be careful what you look forward to because it's also kind of sad. Yeah.
Yeah. We're supposed to get rain between 5 and 7, which is the Lord's answer to the foolishness of Halloween.
Right.
So
yeah.
That's fantastic. Seth Erie went to the youth group, Halloween, whatever that was, fest.
Last night.
Jesus Ween. Whatever I've seen advertisements for Jesus Ween, harvest festivals, fall festivals. Yeah. So, I mean, that was our thing. He was disappointed that, there were certain females that were not present. So we got to report on that. Anywho, dear listener.
He always plays his game, though, like on Holy Post this week. He's just like, he does the Shema, and then you can hear him in the background. I love you, Caitlin Chess.
Dude, he is every bit of 15, man. He is very aware of feminine energy in the room. Oh,
that's
totally
awesome.
And again, Caitlin Chess, it's Phil. And these are people who are involved in the podcast called The Holy Post, which I go on every now and again. It's Phil and Sky, first name only, but then it's Caitlin Chess, one name. It's like she's been elevated to Suzie P. Lind, level. So, dear listeners, we realize not only is it a fun day to record, but it will be a glorious day to receive this if you're listening on the Monday before Election Day. I might speak for all of us when I say I'm done. You can just put a fork in me. I'm okay if we just don't do this again, and I'm all right. I'll live if we don't have to suffer through. Right. I know. And so what I thought we would do is have a bit of a lighter episode, not in terms of feelings, but in terms of we're going to just take a step out of Genesis for a second. I had a genealogy planned, and I thought, well, maybe we can hold off.
The perfect Halloween episode.
Yes, on the genealogy.
Trick or treat.
One thing I want to ask though, if you are the emailing type, how did you receive the episode that we did where we had an audience and we're responding to those questions? I was surprised that we got no feedback on that. The people who did it loved it, but I'm curious, for those of you who listened to it, did you cut off at the Q&A part, or was that a fun dynamic? I'd really love your feedback on that if you're the emailing type. hello@voxpodcast.com. Back when is it Voxology Podcast or Vox?
I think the email is still Vox.
Is it still Vox? Hello@Vox Podcast. Yeah, we're on top of things. The other thing we need to know is Christmas is coming, guys. I'm an early decorator, so this.
Ooh.
Yep. Thanksgiving is a road stop on the way to Christmas, so I will be. Suzie is not, by the way. They'll be that house will be lucky to see a tree, by December 15th. If it, they'll change up some word art, and that's really about all they do.
We drove by a church that's kind of close to our house the other night, and they already have all their lights up.
Oh, yes.
And I was like, I was driving and I'm like, they already have all their lights up?
Yep.
And Nathan's like, Mom, relax. Christmas lights should be up all year long.
Yes, Nathan.
But...
And a child Child will lead us. Tim is shaking his head vigorously.
Nothing made me more upset than walking through Target like mid-October and they had all their Christmas stuff out. I was like, hold on.
It's so aggressive. It's so aggressive.
Listen, it's a 2-month celebration. And I start decorating the week that they shut off the lights. They shut off the sun. So
this weekend.
When we fall back and we're, it's dark at 4:00, it's nice to have some lights floating around. So that's my justification, and I'm sticking to it. But I was going somewhere with that. Christmas. Okay, I got nothing. Speaking of really poorly wrapped gifts, this is new. So as you would imagine, the week before, the insanity intensifies because there's no way election day will solve anything. We'll be
it's
still
not going to end.
Going into January talking about all this, but this is a first for me because I've never heard this so publicly proclaimed, and I don't know what to make of it. And Suzie, I want to start with you, but I've seen several platformed voices on the Twitter talking about how women should vote according to their husband's desires. And this is, I'm sure.
T and Suzie up right out of the gate.
I mean, you did not prep me for this question.
I know.
At all.
But I'm shocked.
For prep, and this is not what because you didn't give anything close to this.
I know. I want the real.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So here's Charlie Kirk.
Oh boy.
He is upset that Republican women may, quote, undermine their husbands and secretly vote for Harris while telling their husbands they voted for Trump, even though the husband, quote, works his tail off to make sure she can have a nice life. So he was concerned about that. And then there was another guy who I will not name. He's just a professional troll. He said, he tweeted out, imagine having a wife who secretly cancels out your vote and then lies to you about it. This is what appeals to Democrat women. And then he quotes from Mark 3, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And someone responded to that tweet by saying, imagine being a husband where your wife needs to secretly vote and lie to you about it, which I thought was a great rejoinder. And then a Fox personality. If I found out my wife secretly voted for Harris, quote, that's the same thing as having an affair that violates the sanctity of marriage. That would be D-Day, which I think might sound for douche. Forgive my... And then the aforementioned troll had previously tweeted, in a Christian marriage, a wife should vote according to her husband's direction. He is the head and they are one. Unity extends to politics. This is not controversial. And of course, he's clickbaiting all of that. Suzie, how many conversations have you and Steve had about Steve's direction in telling you to vote? And did you vote accordingly? That's the question I think we're all dying to know. How do you hear this stuff? How do you hear? I mean, I've never heard this so publicly said.
That's the thing, right? Like, first of all, is Charlie Kirk married?
Poor woman. I mean, I don't know who he is, so I don't know. But someone who says something like that, that's interesting.
He's pretty young from what I gather, but yeah. Is this do you think that these guys are on there saying this stuff just to get a rise out of people? Or do you think that there's people who actually, Mike, you've been in the church for your whole life and all different expressions of it. Do you think that there's really people who think this way?
I think it's both. I think the professional troll is just saying this to get clicks because he's been doing a number of these gender things about a Christian marriage is this, a Christian husband is this.
And I've refused to engage in any of it because I feel like
smart.
It's complete, which is hard for me. I'm not saying it's easy.
And I think that's smart. That's why I don't even mention who it is.
Yeah.
But I do think I do think when Fox and Turning Point and other places are kind of contributing this narrative, it's because it appeals to the way people actually think in some of these circumstances.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't shock me that this, because I mean, if you're going to take Christian headship the way they take it, then well, of course, right? The
yeah, I mean, it seems like they're really trying to appeal to the desire for dominance.
Yes. Is that
which always leads to great places?
I mean, in lots of arenas, like we're seeing it in lots of arenas where like there's this desire for dominance that there are people that are trying to feed, and by dominance, I don't mean leadership. Like I'm all for a man who can lead, but like that's not it.
Yeah. Suzie, one of the things I think Tim and I were talking about a couple episodes ago is so much of this morass is tied into a view of masculinity, which is so interesting to me. Like Trump is the most masculine candidate. Real men are going to vote for Trump. Real men have their wives in line. Like it all sorts of like fits together with a Christian bow over top of it. You've been in the church most of your life, and you've been on the receiving end of so much of this. Have you ever come across anybody who said anything like this to you?
Susie's restraining.
And if I vote,
she really is.
I really am.
If you're watching, you'll see.
Well, my husband, when I was leaving the house today, he admonished me to be careful, knowing I was going to be on this podcast. Bless
him. Bless him.
So, what are you asking me? Have I come across people who think I should vote like my husband?
Yeah. Have you come across this in real life at all? Have you had
No.
anyone say this? Okay.
Not this particular thing. For sure, not this particular thing, but the essence of this particular thing. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like that I need, totally. But not specifically about voting and that if I was going to vote differently, I'd be cheating on my husband. That's not. But I do think that the thing that really kind of doesn't sit well with me, and I've been thinking about this so much lately, and I don't know that I can even articulate it well because it just is something, it's just like a feeling that I have that when this rhetoric kind of rises up, it feels like there's like a zero-sum game involved, there's a lot of talk about all the women are voting for Kamala and all the men are voting for Trump, and men don't feel like they can be men anymore because there's trans people in the world and all this stuff. And so like there's this assault on manhood, and I'm a mom of 4 boys. So I'm very much paying attention to whether my boys are suffering or being overlooked or let down because they're boys. And I don't think that we have as a family done that. And I don't like they're all working full-time people. They're doing what they want to be doing and they're contributing to society. But there is this narrative that's being fed that feels like, well, if women have any sort of empowerment, then it's at the detriment of men. And so I think that we've done a really good job of, empowering women and showing young girls like, oh, you can be a STEM girl. You can do what you can run for office. You can do all these things. And we've done such a good job empowering girls and women, but we have not done a good job of empowering men to live alongside empowered women. That's what I think we're feeling. At least I'm feeling.
So
I don't want to speak for anybody else, but that's what's so hard about it is that, if you vote for the woman, then you're against manhood.
Yeah.
It's like it feels like an assault to their manhood and their manliness if their wife chooses a different option.
Right.
Which doesn't affect their marriage much in reality.
Well, it might in the case of this Fox host. Timothy,
what?
You have loads of thoughts about biblical masculinity. Suzie, I think Susie's onto something. I think that's really insightful, Suze. The zero-sum game of this.
Well, it's hard because it's the same thing. I think as the great replacement theory or whatever that Tucker Carlson floats around about. White people are being intentionally replaced by minorities and whatever, and creating fear around that idea. It's like masculinity is under attack. Being white is under attack. Christianity is under attack. Like Christians aren't safe. And you say on here a lot, right, that Jesus is under no threat. Like the kingdom is not under threat. The kingdom is okay. And so, but I think Jesus that's a really important. Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to hold on to in this time, because I think that idea covers most of these things. Like these things are not under threat. We're just talking about letting other folks have some airtime and, elevating other voices who have been suppressed for so long. It just drives me nuts. But people like Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Driscoll, all those,
we'll get to him.
All those talking heads, they may be trolls. I would not be terribly surprised if they do think this stuff for real. But as I've said before, working with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids every day. So I did conferences this whole last 2 weeks, one-on-one conferences to help them choose their
Tim is an English professor.
Their argumentative paper topics. And I see how this stuff trickles down into that age group, and they take it as truth. And they take it as, not all of them, but I'll hear this kind of rhetoric come out from people about masculinity, about gender politics. And they see this threat, and I'm using the air quotes, as a real thing that is trying to strip them of what is right and what is real. And so whether or not these guys are trolls at the top of the heap, their vitriol seeps down, and people rally behind this. And I think that's why we see so much anger and hatred and just terrible language all over the place, because people, you tell them the house is on fire, they're going to react.
Yep.
So it's just, that's what gets me, is like, you can be a troll all you want, but words have effect. Like words matter, words make a difference, words cause people to do things. So that's what gets me going, is watching these kids just absorb this stuff.
That's good.
It does all feel very reactionary. I mean, like it seems like so many things out there they're marketed as a reaction to like what men need because of what they've lost, Right. And I mean, hear me when I say, like, I love seeing men empowered to be who they are. I think they should be leaders if they're leaders. I think but in the biblical sense, leading is serving. It's benevolence. It's in the Jesus way. It's cruciform. I mean, it's like, I love that. Like, I will follow any man into serving other people well and loving other people well. So that's not it. And it's just this reaction always of like, you were taught to be passive, you were taught to be irresponsible. And we know the detriment that a lack of fatherhood causes. I mean, there's been tons of studies on that. So we know that there's something there, but it just seems like it's a reaction to, and then often followed by a blaming of the women.
I mean, and because we've done 27 episodes in Genesis, maybe it started there. I don't know. Maybe that's something that has ancient roots. Just throwing it out there.
The obsession with genitals is just insane. Remember our punk band, what was it?
Evangelicals. Yes. Well, because the church is under threat, a very well-known pastor who was just mentioned
Mike
tweeted
Erie?
out, huh?
Sorry, I didn't know which pastor we were talking about. Was it Mike Erie?
No, I'm not a well-known pastor. This individual and his wife was part of it was an historic day. President Trump will be adding a faith office in the White House that directly reports to him to protect and preserve the church. And so my question is, I thought, and again, I mean, we have such better things to do. We all say dumb stuff. I'm fine with people saying dumb stuff. I mean, if we got harangued for all the dumb stuff that Tim says, I mean, it would be, good Lord, that's all we'd be doing.
It's true.
I live by the maxim, when there are many words, sin is not absent. So let's just throw that proverb out there. But the thing that struck me wasn't that former President Trump would have a faith advisory council. Great. I'm all for people of faith being involved at those levels. The interesting thing was that it was interpreted, and I don't know if this was said, but this pastor certainly interpreted it as to protect and preserve the church. Yep. The church needs protecting and preserving, and the government's role is to do that.
Yeah.
Suzie P. Lind, thoughts? Agree? Disagree?
Well, I mean, if you look at church history throughout the ages, that typically doesn't go well.
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah. Say more about
usually, that. I mean, like when you think about, the Roman Empire, Constantine, I mean, you can go on and on and on. Every time somebody in power has a salvation experience, if you will, an experience with Christianity, and they embed that into the way the government practices and shows up in the world, it's usually the beginning of the end of that empire or civilization or whatever. I mean, like,
and it's certainly the end of the purity of that religious institution.
Yeah, every time. I mean, you go back, and I mean, it's all over the place, like hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So I just, but like, what is he preserving? Because like, there's so many different expressions of the church, and like,
totally.
And
well, you can't be a Christian if you vote a certain way. So I guess we're preserving the true church.
That has been very apparent during this cycle too.
Yeah, and that's the part that's so confusing to me.
Well, it's because, I mean, listen, the failure of discipleship is so massive culturally that now political identity has been substituted for Christian identity. Therefore, salvation language is attached now to who you vote for. I mean, it could not be more corrupted, So it doesn't surprise me, but the idea that I think many people would have, that it is the government's place and the church's place, the government's place to protect and preserve, and the church's place to receive that protection and preservation from the government. Historically, you're so money. Like, right, you just can't point to one positive example of that. Absolutely.
And that's certainly not what was happening in Jesus's day. He wasn't trying to get that done.
No. And you could argue, I mean, if you want to kill the church, make it the state religion. And if you want the church to grow, persecute it. And so it's flourishing in all of these places where either governments are apathetic towards it or hostile towards it. It's dying where governments have co-opted it. And it just couldn't be, but it goes back to what both of you were saying. It's a mindset that says that Jesus is under threat, the kingdom is under threat, and part of our responsibility as Christians is to ensure whether it's Christian values or people or principles are enshrined through the power of government, which is a power over posture, to bring aspects of the kingdom to fruition. I was reading this week a historian who was talking about this, and I've quoted this possibly before, I don't remember, but he was saying, according to some estimates, in AD 100, there were only 25,000 Christians in the world. by AD 310, right before Constantine legalized Christianity, all right, so it was still under threat, so to speak, there were 20 million.
200 years.
Yep. And how did they do this is a really interesting question. And we talked a bit about it on the podcast. It was through counter community. It wasn't through outreach programs, political involvement. It wasn't through holy warfare. It was, it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. But think about all the things that were disadvantages to that early movement. They were an illegal religion. I mean, for a while they lived under the umbrella of protection given to Judaism. But when people realized it was a different thing, then both Jews and Romans began to persecute it. They didn't have church buildings or budgets. They didn't have the scriptures or commentaries, right? They just had apostles or people who'd been discipled by apostles. They had no institutional organization. We see right at the end of the 2nd century, the beginning of bishops and some sort of like networking of churches. They didn't have seeker-sensitive worship or sermons. And they actually made it really hard to join the church, right? In some cases, there was a year of examining where you would examine potential converts, for a year as you discipled them into something called the Didache, which is an early church like instruction formation manual, before they would be baptized in the church. Sometimes that was 2 or 3 years, according to some.
Is that where we get like catechism from and all that?
Exactly. That's exactly what that was called. You would catechize them. Yes. Mm-hmm. And then there were all sorts of social disadvantages to become a Christian. And in that environment, when it was truly under threat, and over the course of those 200 years, Christians were being burned and fed to the lions and sold as entertainment and the whole range of things, that the church mushroomed, flourished, blossomed. It was exactly as Jesus said. It starts out as just a seed, and then it explodes into this mustard tree that takes over the whole yard. And the people who think that the church needs preserved or protected, they're not only missing all the historical precedents about this, but the radical nature of the kingdom is such that the kingdom never comes by power over, ever. Not once has it ever come through power over. The closest we get to power over is Jesus exorcising demons. But in terms of the human community, it never comes through power over. And so the idea the church needs protected or preserved, I think is antithetical to the witness, but also the explicit teaching of Jesus in the early church. Tim, would you agree with that?
100%. I keep thinking, well, first of all, we mentioned this last week, but empire just corrupts everything it touches. And I've been I've been reading that Scottish theology book.
Yeah, your Celtic book?
Yeah, and one of the chapters is on the sacredness of the earth, that the earth is sacred, and there's elements of that we should be respecting and whatnot. Empire destroys and commodifies the planet. Mm-hmm. It destroys and commodifies people. Like it's just a machine, and that's how that machine operates.
Yeah.
So trying to marry empire to church, it is antithetical. Like they are not; those two things don't mix. And I think it's not a mystery at all that Jesus did not come as a political military leader. It just makes too much sense. And then on top of that, while you were talking, I just could not stop thinking about like the temptation of the desert. So many of those temptations are about power over or about fear or threat. Like you don't have this, but you could if you just da-da-da. It's like it's really appealing to those same pieces that are being appealed to, or that are being appealing to us right now. And he was just like, no, and had his responses for why, and none of them were based in fear. It was based in the truth of the matter. We are like I talked about last week, the Moms for Liberty event thing. Like fear is just this like massive tool that is being used by the church and by the government, and it's just to make people feel scared, scarcity and fear and all this. It's just so gross, and it is so antithetical. It's a real bummer.
Was it Martin Luther King that said fear leads to hate and hate leads to violence?
That was Yoda.
It was.
No, that's to the dark side.
No, fear leads to hate. Hate leads to
anger, and anger leads to suffering.
Yes, that was
suffering.
Yoda. Yes, but yeah,
So,
we'll go with the MLK quote.
What is it that the church needs to be protected and preserved from? Like what is it that the White House, whatever it is, Department of Church can what is it that they're protecting and preserving?
I would like to nominate Suzie for the Department of Church.
No, they wouldn't hire me.
Department of Church. Yes.
You can't, you're a woman.
True.
That's fair. Yeah, that's a very interesting question because like Tim, you were just saying, we're under threat. It's a zero-sum game. So if people who are not part of the church are getting really, they're just being equaled out in terms of their voice, influence. It's not like somebody, I think it was Bonnie years ago, said, what feels like
the chicken is
a
in the
loss. Oven. Oh, there's a callback. What was it? That when we see other people be empowered, it feels like a loss of cultural privilege for us, and so we feel under threat. It's the same thing, Suzie, you were talking about male and female is like church state or church world. It's a zero-sum game, and you can't honor the dignity of other people, and that comes at the cost of the church. It's got to be some of that, right? I mean, it's got to be the naked threat of, guys, we can't say Merry Christmas anymore. We have to be politically correct. We have to, and again, that for me goes straight back into masculinity. Why do some people like the former president? Because he's authentic. That's they'll say. He just doesn't. He's not politically correct. I have a question for the two of you, and what wisdom do you have in holding the two following things in tension? Number one, the issues we're talking about matter. Like, they're important. They cause harm or flourishing in the world. And part of a Christian's participation in the world seems to be to take up, at least in some respects, the invitation of the state to say, what do you think about this? But how do we countenance that? That's on the one hand. With the Jesus is still on the throne, the church is not under threat, we're still people of hope. This is not the most important election of our lifetime because the next one will be. What's the wisdom that we would offer, come from our own experience about how to sit in that the tension, the eschatological realism of voting? On the one hand, it's voting matters, but it's not ultimate. And the idolatry and the fear and the anger behind it is showing us it's energized by something that isn't always, a good and healthy sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So Suzie, do you, and what I love about Suzie Lynn, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know her, not only is she super intelligent and articulate, but she's one of the most emotionally healthy people I know. And you do a great job of having all of the feelings about this, and rightly so. And yet you're at work about how to have them in healthy ways, And so what's some of your hard-won wisdom,
which would be great qualifications for being the Department of the Church?
Yeah.
That's really kind, Mike. I don't necessarily feel that way all the time, but that's really kind that that's how you experience me. I'm glad for that. I mean, so I have to tell myself this every day right now, like, and it's complicated, right? Because like we all come from, we all come with our stories and stuff like that, and I certainly come with mine. But I think about like in Jeremiah where he says to work for the prosperity of the land, and you will also prosper. And like this is an exile, and it's not the ideal situation. And prosperity, he doesn't mean like so you can all get rich. He means so that there's flourishing, right? Flourishing in the land and the earth and the people and all of that. That's what he means by prosperity. And so I think that my vote is it is part of my working for the prosperity of the land that I find myself in. And so, but the other thing is like I'm an immigrant. I moved here when I was 6. I didn't become an American citizen until I was 24. So like my first time voting felt so special to me because I had that right to vote, and it was a privilege to me. And I still get like a little salty when people choose not to vote, because it's like your vote doesn't count in a lot of countries. So the fact that we do get to have a say in it, regardless of what you believe, I think we still have a say in it, and we say it with our vote on election days. We say it, especially when it's local elections, we say it with how we spend our money and what we choose to give our energy to, like all of that. And
we're always voting.
Yeah, like I think it's so important to do all of those things and not put your trust in all of those things. Like it would be so easy for me to say that my hope is in the outcome of next week, because I have particular outcomes I'd like to see on the local level, especially, and all of that. And yet I have to like tell myself constantly the truth that, like you said, like I'm one who Christ dwells in and delights in, and the kingdom of God is not shaken, and therefore neither am I. Like it's that truth that I believe it in my head, but I don't always cognitively believe it. I don't believe it. I don't embody it all the time. And I want to be someone who is faithful, even if I do end up being someone who's persecuted for my faith, or, some rights get taken away from me, all of that. Like, my hope is not in that. And that's hard. That's hard to live when the issues are screaming in your face all the time,
Totally. Yes.
So.
Yes. Love that. Tim, how about you, bud?
I agree a lot with that my hope is not built on this. My hope is built on everything we've been talking about. But the reality is I think there are people in some of those positions that will alleviate some of the roadblocks to like partnering in that hope in the real world. I think some people could be on take that office and make that more difficult. But I'm not afraid of that. I'm working a lot in therapy right now. We're starting to do a bunch of this like internal family system therapy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. To me, I have such a disconnect between my head and my heart. That's been the focus of our therapy for a while, is just that I have been disconnected for as long as I can remember. So I'm operating even emotionally out of logic, and that's not working well for me. So in a lot of this stuff, it shows why my anxiety spins out of control. Because I think like the tension that you're talking about, for me, I've realized if I don't feel the tension, then I've planted myself somewhere incorrect. And so that's what I find so fascinating about this conversation about being under threat and fear is like, what are you advocating for? Are you advocating for a position in which you no longer feel any tension at all? Is that what would happen if you vote to get out of the persecution that's coming or whatever, what is the end result, the desired end result of that fear campaign? And if it's to live in a place where there is no tension, then I think you took a left turn somewhere. The tension, I think, is what shows me that or a right turn. But so I see my position as trying to dispel fear and offer hope. And then try to, like in the classroom, all I do is try to provoke people to ask harder questions. So when the kids came in yesterday and like, I want to write about abortion, or I want to write about, one of the kids was like, I kind of want to write about how women shouldn't be able to have equal rights or something to that extent. And it's like, I hold my tongue for a second and I ask them to tease out from opinion into fact and what you're talking about. So the abortion one's always such a good example because they're always shocked to hear stats about what moves the needle to less abortions, and it's always opposite of what they think. And so it's like, if you really care about this thing, this is how you will work towards it. Yeah. And so that's how, at this point, it's like, no matter who wins on Tuesday, I don't see my job as being tremendously different.
That's right.
But I do see one candidate might make some of those things easier to advocate for, and one may make them more difficult. Yeah. And I will vote accordingly. But I don't think my job changes much.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of that.
Yeah.
I don't see that as a threat.
Yeah. It's like you said at the beginning, Mike, like, we're still going to have dinner together. We're still going to worship together. We're still going to pray for each other. We're still going to carry each other's burdens. We're still going to serve people. We're still going to look for who's marginalized and who's left out and who's not getting what they need, and figure out ways to help them. Like, those are all things that we're still going to do. And whether there's a church building or some kind of attachment to it, like, I don't think, I don't think that matters. I mean, the way of doing church for the last couple hundreds of years probably needs to die. So, but I think also, Tim, like, to your point though, of like head and heart and all that stuff, like I think participating in the process is part of like connecting your body to your heart and your mind. Like, I was talking to Rob today. He went and voted yesterday, and he's like, I strangely like felt so good afterwards. And I'm like, yeah, because there's something cathartic to the fact that you're doing something with the privilege that's been entrusted to you. You're doing something about your anger. Like, you're there fighting for something that you think is good. And so that does connect your body to your heart and your mind, for at least a day.
Yeah. And a lot of that too, like, I've made so much peace with the idea that I am going to be repenting sometimes multiple times a day for the rest of my life. So as I get spun out or whatever, like, that's been such a gift to me to realize that is a, like, that is an actionable item that I have every single day to reorient myself. Like, I'm never too lost. I can always, so no matter how afraid I am, or how much I participate in fear, or how much I participate in whatever, I always have the option to reorient myself. And that's, like, for me, that's so life-giving. It's been such a blessing to know that I can always do that. And then to share with other people, like, hey, that sucks. Guess what? You can pivot here. Like, it's not the end of the world. We can always reorient ourselves. And that's what, like, with all this election stuff and the partnering with the church and that kind of stuff, like, I guess that's why I don't lose hope in it. I don't have faith in the church currently, me personally, but I have hope that people can always, when they're given the opportunity, given the tools to critically think and ask questions and that kind of stuff, they can always reorient. And I think that truth does that to people. I think it provokes people to honest response, honest participation and stuff. So you can't take that away. You can try to bury it, but you can't kill it.
Well, don't you think that that's what Jesus meant about not being able to, hold back the church? I mean, even if the church as we know it goes away, or, like it has in all of those civilizations we talked about before, the actual church doesn't die. It doesn't, like, the people of God, the body of Christ doesn't die.
Indestructible.
Yeah, that redefinition, I think, is so important for folks, that the institution of church may perish and maybe needs to, but the actual church and the actual kingdom will not. And that's great. There's a lot of hope in that.
Yeah. And that's why Jesus didn't play any of the political games of his day.
Turns out he was pretty smart.
It's like he was Thanos, just looking at the world saying, I am inevitable. And it's true. And that's, I think for me, there are two things that really help. One is the nature of the kingdom of God, that yes, we participate in it, and we can help show off its flourishing, but it's not resting on the purity of our theology or our political efforts or our moral formation. And the other thing that really gives me comfort is that there is no political institution, personality, or policy that captures the kingdom of God. So our posture towards politics is the same regardless of who is in power. We receive what can be aligned with the kingdom. We reject what is anti-kingdom. And we create a flourishing counterculture that tells a much bigger story than whatever American story is being told. That is the job description, no matter who is in power.
Yeah, it's so
and
important.
So for me, I just think about the faces I'll look at next Sunday across the table, and as we're exploring the text and singing together, or whatever else, that for me the posture doesn't change. I do agree, and I vote accordingly into what I think most, or not most, but even allows for the possibility of kingdom flourishing. Absolutely, absolutely. But even there, I'm not voting because I think the candidates are aligned perfectly with anything. And so for me, the posture is the same, no matter what. And I'm with Suzie. If we ever get to the place where freedoms are curtailed, then Acts gives us a great guide to that. We submit where we can, and we subvert where we can't. And that's just the way of the kingdom. And our subversion is never violent. It's never power over. It's just lament, demonstration, protest. I mean, all the things. So for me, I'm excited for it to be over. Just like some of you are excited for this podcast to be over. So let me close.
Well, real quick, I think post Tuesday, the idea of loving your neighbor is going to be really important. And I mean that regardless of who your neighbor is. Right. We're going to see some folks who are going to be very angry and disappointed and afraid and hurt. We're going to see a lot of marginalized folks possibly that are going to be pushed further down and are going to need advocates and partners and allies. And so there's just to reiterate over and over again that on Wednesday morning, our job doesn't end regardless as neighbors and humans.
Yeah. That Sermon on the Mount still applies.
And there's always hope. And again, we should revisit that at some point, but the coming out of the Sermon on the Mount with Jesus just summing it up again, just being like, guys, this was a lot of great information. Love your neighbor. So if that's all you can do is just be that person to somebody else, I think that might be enough. Is just to be that hope and that light and that love for somebody else, regardless of however things turn out on Tuesday.
And if you need a day to cry first, it's okay.
Take it. Yeah.
I'm crying right now. I want to close with this prayer that I found in the Book of Common Prayer, or one of its companion prayers. Our church went through a Kingdom of God sort of series and drawing out its political implications. And one of the prayers that's been super challenging that I want to read twice over us as we sort of close. And it says, God of justice, help us discern wisely those we choose as leaders, and grant us grace to accept results we did not desire, and the strength to never fail in advocating for a world of justice, peace, and mercy. Amen. God of justice, help us discern wisely those we choose as leaders, and grant us grace to accept results we did not desire, and the strength to never fail in advocating for a world of justice, peace, and mercy. Amen.
Amen.
Suzie P, Timothy J.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, guys. This was really, really great. So, friends, thank you for listening. And, we'll be here next week. So I'm sure we'll have loads to talk about. Until then, friends, bye.
Bye.